They didn't grow up like us. Not under gentle suns. Not beside still waters. Not in worlds where danger gave warnings. No, humans came from a place that tried to kill them every second of every day. And somehow, they didn't just survive it. They adapted to it. Worse, they evolved with it. Their minds learned to think fast. But their bodies? Their bodies learned to move faster. So fast, in fact, that by the time a threat appears, by the time a weapon rises, by the time an alien so much as flinches, it's already too late. No thought, no planning, just pure, terrifying reflex. A flick of the hand, a shift of the weight, and someone's already on the floor, gasping, bleeding, or just gone. And when the galaxy finally asked the question out loud, when they looked at Earth's soldiers, Earth's civilians, even Earth's children, and whispered, "What the hell is wrong with human combat reflexes?" They didn't like the answer, because the answer wasn't medical. It wasn't technological. It wasn't even genetic. It was evolutionary. It was cultural, and it was unstoppable. The silence before contact. They watched Earth for years, from behind cloaked satellites, from probes drifting at the edge of the solar system, from deep space listening stations tuned to every frequency humans had ever broadcast. At first, it was curiosity, a new species, uncatalogued, loud, primitive, strange. But then something fell off, because humans weren't just building tools. They were building weapons. Before they reached spaceflight, they had already split the atom twice. Before they made peace with each other, they made wars that swallowed continents. They recorded every second of it. They filmed it, studied it, analyzed it like a science. Who does that? Who studies were like a language? The galactic community watched in silence as humanity rose out of its cradle. And instead of slowing down, they just kept accelerating. Fire became gunpowder. Gunpowder became missiles. Missiles became drones. And still, somehow, their wars never truly stopped, only evolved. Peace, for humans, wasn't the absence of war. It was just a pause between upgrades. And that's when the Council started worrying. Because it wasn't just the weapons. It wasn't the technology. It was how they moved. The first real footage came from a Martian outpost. A survey drone captured 2 humans sparring. No armor. No augmentation. Just training. Just practice. One fainted left. The other dropped low before the strike even began. Like his body knew what was coming before his eyes did. No telepathy. No precognition. Just something else. Something far more dangerous. Reflex. But not the kind seen in most species, where stimuli must travel to the brain, get processed, and then return with a decision. No. Human reflexes often skip that loop entirely. They act before the brain even knows what's happening. Autonomic, muscle memory, neurochemical priming. In simple terms, the human body moves first. The mind catches up later. At first, it seemed impossible. No civilized species operates like that. That kind of instinct that belongs to predators, wild animals, survivors, not diplomats, not engineers, not explorers. But humans were all of those things, and more. And that's what terrified the Council. Because what do you do with a species whose first response to danger is to strike? Who doesn't need to think or plan or pause? Who doesn't hesitate? Just reacts. Even worse, they train for it. They hone it. Entire human militaries exist not just to fight, but to sharpen the speed of that fight. Twitch faster. Think less. Trust the instinct. Species with hive minds couldn't comprehend it. Species with long reaction cycles called it barbaric. But the ones who understood? The ones who evolved in dangerous ecosystems, who still remembered fear, they stayed very, very quiet. They voted to postpone first contact. Again and again. Too soon, they said. Too risky. Let them develop more. Let them civilize. Let them slow down. But humans never slowed down. And so, like all things in galactic history, it wasn't wisdom that forced the first meeting. It was curiosity and greed and pride. A minor species on the edge of Council territory, nervous, ambitious, eager for relevance, decided to act. They sent a ship, not a war vessel, not a fleet, just a small diplomatic craft. A first contact team, trained in etiquette, non-aggressive, peaceful. They landed quietly, broadcast a greeting, approached the human settlement with open arms. And for 1 full minute, everything was fine. The air was calm. The translators worked. The humans waved back. Then one of the alien delegates stepped too close, too fast, toward a human soldier standing post. No weapons were drawn. No commands were given. No warning was issued. The human simply moved. A blur. A crack. A thud. By the time the others realized what had happened, 3 alien scouts were on the ground. Alive. But barely. One had a shattered arm. Another was unconscious. The third had no idea what hit him. And the soldier? He was standing there, breathing heavily, apologizing. His hands were shaking, not from anger, but from shock. He didn't know why he'd done it. All he knew was that something felt wrong. A sudden shape, a closing distance. And before his brain could process it, his body had already decided. That was the moment everything changed. Not because of violence, but because the aliens watching from orbit saw the whole thing in real time. Frame by frame, measured by sensors, analyzed by machines. 3 targets, 3 precise strikes, all within 1.4 seconds. No hesitation, no wasted motion, no thought, just pure, terrifying reaction. The mission was aborted. The council was notified, and the question that had lingered in whispers for years was finally spoken aloud. What the hell is wrong with human combat reflexes? The first encounter. The council tried to spin it as an accident, a misunderstanding, a species-specific miscommunication. Nothing more, but the data said otherwise. And once the footage leaked to the wider galactic community, no one could look away. They played it in slow motion, analyzed the frames, measured the microseconds between movements. It wasn't a reaction in the way most species understood it. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't panicked. It was surgical. 1 step forward, left elbow up, right hand twists the approaching limb, knee to the chest, pivot, slam, done, all in less time than it takes most species to blink. And the worst part? The soldier wasn't even trying. In the post-incident debrief, he looked confused, ashamed, even scared of himself. He kept saying the same thing. I didn't mean to. I didn't even know I was doing it. That's when the panic truly started. Because if a human could deliver that kind of disabling force without intention, then what happens when they do mean it? What happens when they're actually angry? Galactic intelligence agencies scrambled for answers, scoured the Terran networks, dug through history, medical records, military files. What they found only made it worse. Because this wasn't rare. This wasn't one soldier. This wasn't even a military phenomenon. This was everyone. Teachers, engineers, doctors, teenagers, grandmothers. Footage emerged of a human civilian grabbing a falling glass midair without looking. A police officer disarming a gunman in a blur of limbs. A schoolchild ducking a fastball and countering with a perfect catch, all while chewing gum. It wasn't learned. It was wired in. Instincts wrapped in bone and nerve. Reaction time so fast it bypassed the brain entirely. A reflex loop evolved over millions of years on a planet that never stopped trying to kill them. That's what the scientists finally realized. Earth was a death world, one of the worst on record. High gravity, toxic flora, aggressive fauna, unstable weather systems, and predators, so many predators. The kind that didn't give warnings, didn't growl, didn't posture. They struck from behind, from above, from below the water. And so humans evolved something new. A way to act before thinking, to move before understanding, to survive first and ask questions later. It wasn't aggression. It was preemptive survival. And now, the galaxy was dealing with a species that didn't need to choose violence. Their bodies had already chosen for them. A senator from the Androthi species said it best. We pride ourselves on measured response, on logic, on restraint. But the humans? They don't need restraint. Their danger doesn't come from emotion. It comes from automation, from instinct. They are not violent because they are angry. They are violent because they were built that way. The silence that followed the incident grew louder. Diplomatic channels slowed to a crawl. Ambassadorial missions were paused. More and more species voted to delay formal contact. But not everyone agreed. There were still skeptics, still voices calling for calm. Perhaps it's only soldiers, they argued. Perhaps only trained humans act like that. They couldn't have been more wrong, because the galaxy was about to learn something else, something far worse. Reflex is only the beginning. Training makes it worse. Combat reflexes, explained. They brought in the best minds in the galaxy. Neurobiologists, combat analysts, tactical historians, even species that had never fought a war in 10,000 years. And they all studied the same footage, the same movement, the same human soldier, the same terrifying moment where thought was skipped entirely. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, not because of the violence, but because of the speed. One alien analyst summed it up in a quiet breath. He struck before the command would have reached his brain. That shouldn't have been possible. In most species, input comes in through the eyes or ears, travels up to the brain, gets processed, evaluated, compared against memory, emotion, threat models. Then finally, a response is sent back through the nervous system, a process that takes, on average, half a second. Even elite warriors in other species might shave it down to 0.2 seconds with years of focus. But the human? He moved in 0.06, less than a tenth of a second, before his brain even had the chance to catch up. They tested it again and again. Different humans, different settings, different stressors. Same result. Fast, instinctive, flawless, even under extreme pressure, especially under pressure. Their brains don't shut down when adrenaline spikes. They sharpen. They focus. They call it fight or flight. The galaxy calls it madness. Because what kind of creature responds to danger? Not with retreat or negotiation, but with an automatic counterstrike? And worse, what kind of species trains that ability on purpose? That's when the galaxy began digging into human combat doctrine. And what they found was even more disturbing. Because it turns out, this wasn't some fluke of evolution. It was refined, sharpened, weaponized. From childhood, humans engage in games that mimic combat. Tag, dodgeball, martial arts, all of it teaching the body to react, not think. By adolescence, their training becomes formal. Sports, drills, reflex testing, muscle memory encoded through repetition until the body becomes a machine. And for soldiers, the process becomes clinical. Reflexive shooting, immediate response conditioning, simulations with flashing lights, sudden movements, blaring sounds, all designed to break the gap between seeing and doing. They don't aim. They don't process. They move. By the time a threat is identified, their body has already engaged. And it only gets worse from there. Because once the body is trained, the brain steps aside. They enter what they call the zone. A state where the conscious mind fades into the background, where time seems to slow down, where the hands move on their own, where opponents become silhouettes, threats become shapes, and victory is a foregone conclusion. Some of them even enjoy it. Not the violence, the clarity, the feeling of complete control. No hesitation, no fear, just movement. One alien general watched footage of a human special forces team clearing a simulated structure. 10 rooms, 30 targets, all neutralized in under a minute. The humans never spoke. They didn't need to. They flowed like water, cleared corners, moved with terrifying unity. Each action was instinct. When it was over, the general whispered. They didn't fight like soldiers. They moved like predators. Silent, certain, final. And this wasn't some rare elite force. This was standard for trained units. The council couldn't believe it, so they conducted further tests, under observation, under strict control. They invited humans into controlled combat simulations with non-lethal constraints. No real weapons, no intent to harm, just reflex testing. The humans complied. They smiled, laughed, treated it like a game, until the lights dimmed, and the first alien stepped forward, and the movement began. What happened next wasn't just fast. It was inevitable. 3 moves ahead, always predicting, always reacting faster than their opponent could finish a thought. No wasted steps, no second chances. Even when they missed on purpose to bait the counter. It wasn't fighting, it was dominance. And when it ended, the room fell silent. The human took off his training gloves and asked, "Did I do okay?" No ego, no swagger, just casual, calm breath. The aliens monitoring him hadn't even moved from their seats. They were too stunned, because they had just witnessed what happened when reflex meets training. And they finally understood. Humans don't just react. They prepare to react. They practice until instinct becomes strategy, until flinching becomes fatal for the enemy. And the worst part? That soldier hadn't even tried. He was holding back. He thought it was practice. So the question was no longer, why are they like this? Now, the galaxy had to ask something far more chilling. What happens when they stop pretending? Training makes it worse. For most species in the galaxy, combat is a last resort, an outdated relic, a historical mistake they've long since outgrown. Even those with active militaries see war as strategy, cold, calculated, theoretical. But Earth treats it differently. To humans, combat is not an emergency protocol. It's a discipline, a craft, an entire way of life. And once the Council realized that, the fear deepened. Because natural reflexes were one thing. You could explain those. Blame evolution. Rationalize them as accidents of a dangerous world. But training? Training meant intent. It meant Earth knew what it was doing and chose to make it worse. Alien analysts began combing through military archives. Drills, doctrine, recruitment footage. They expected to find orders, strategies, careful plans. What they found was something else. Humans being thrown into chaos on purpose. Boot camps built around confusion and noise. Flashbangs, screaming instructors, sudden shocks. Everything designed to override the thinking mind. React, the humans said. Don't freeze. Don't hesitate. Trust your training. And what training it was. Obstacle courses with real pain. Hand-to-hand sparring in gas masks. Weapon drills in freezing rain, sweltering heat, pitch-black darkness. Timed exercises where one wrong move meant injury. Or humiliation. Or being kicked out entirely. And that was just for entry-level infantry. Special forces? They went further. Simulated hostage situations. Live-fire stress drills. Underwater combat. Zero-G grappling. Pain resistance. Sleep deprivation. The entire human process was designed not just to create warriors, but to train the body to act before the mind even wakes up, to make flinching obsolete, to make hesitation a foreign concept, to harden instinct in a muscle. One report said it best. They do not teach their soldiers to kill. They teach them to survive, and in doing so, killing becomes inevitable. Even their language reflects it. Situational awareness, combat readiness, threat neutralization, rules of engagement. Everything is about preparation, about not waiting for danger to act first. And that idea spreads far beyond the battlefield. In human culture, even civilians train for chaos. Martial arts, boxing, self-defense courses, police drills, firearms safety. To most galactic species, such things are disturbing. Why teach your people to fight if you don't expect them to need it? But Earth has an answer, a philosophy. Better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. A saying passed down through generations, whispered like wisdom, burned into bone. And the Council realized something else. Humans don't just fear violence. They respect it. They study it. They prepare for it. Not because they want it, but because they know it will come. That mindset, the quiet acceptance of danger, changes everything. Because when danger does arrive, humans don't freeze. They don't panic. They don't run. They act, not out of bloodlust, not out of rage, but out of readiness. One alien envoy described it like this. It's like they've already played the battle in their heads 100 times. When the moment comes, it's just another round. That's what makes it worse. Because by the time you realize a human has moved, you're already on the ground, disarmed, broken, or worse. And when they stand over you, calm and breathing steady, you know it wasn't personal. It wasn't emotional. It was reflex, sharpened by centuries of obsession. In fact, some of them even seemed bored by it. Desensitized, relaxed, as if fighting is just routine. One alien witness to a sparring match wrote, "They struck with machine-like precision, without hate, without fear." But what chilled me most was the yawn that followed. That was the final straw for some. The idea that humans could move with lethal speed and feel nothing at all. No glory, no triumph, just completion. It's not that they don't care. It's that their training makes caring optional, which means if you're in their way, and the moment calls for violence, they won't hate you. They won't even think about you. They'll simply react. Fast, efficient, done. And that's when the galaxy finally understood. This wasn't a dangerous species. It was a disciplined one. And that made it 10 times worse. Simulation gone wrong. The galaxy had questions. Too many. Too loud. Too fearful. So they did what any advanced civilization would do. They built a simulation chamber. High walls, soft floors, non-lethal restraints, medical teams on standby, observation decks layered with reinforced glass and shielding, a neutral environment, no weapons, no stakes, just tests, data, control. The idea was simple. Observe human combat reflexes under strict containment. No threats, no real danger, just scenarios, variables, patterns, input and output. Science. What did go wrong? They issued an invitation to several humans, military and civilian, voluntary participants, well-briefed, respectful. They smiled. They shook hands. They walked into the chamber as guests. The observers relaxed. They'd studied human psychology. They knew the basics. They expected tension, maybe a few quick moves, some clever tricks, but they weren't afraid. Not yet. Not until the first match began. 2 volunteers, 1 human, 1 Andoran, a tall, agile species known for grace and speed. Both unarmed, both in light clothing. Both told it was non-competitive, just a reflex drill. At the signal, the Andoran stepped forward fast, intending to feint. They never finished the move. The human's left arm shot forward, caught the wrist mid-motion, twisted, dropped low, swept the legs in one smooth movement. The Andoran hit the padded floor with a thud that made everyone flinch. Stunned silence. Medical rushed in. No serious damage, just bruised pride. The human backed away, hands up, apologizing. They didn't even realize what they'd done. I thought we were starting, but that was the start, and it was only the beginning. Match after match, species from across the stars stepped forward. Each one carefully chosen. Faster than average. Better reflexes. Elite in their own right. None of them lasted longer than 10 seconds. Some didn't last 3. And the humans? They weren't sweating. They weren't even trying. Just reading motion. Reacting. Flowing. It looked effortless. Beautiful even. Until one alien, the Creel delegate, got frustrated. He was fast. Confident. Prideful. He demanded another round. Full speed, he said. No mercy. The human agreed. Smiled even. And when the match began, no one saw what happened. Not really. One moment, the Creel lunged forward. The next, he was in the air, flipping backwards. Crashed hard against the chamber wall. Unconscious before he hit the ground. Every monitor in the room went red. Alarms blared. Medical teams stormed in. The human froze. Hands up. Confused again. I didn't mean to, he said. He moved weird. My body just reacted. That was the moment the room turned cold. Because this wasn't war. This wasn't combat. This was a controlled test. A simulation. And the human had still knocked someone unconscious by accident. The council ordered the session stopped. Immediately. But the damage was done. Footage leaked. Of course it did. Clips of humans moving faster than motion sensors could track. Dodging without seeing. Striking without aim. And always that same look afterward. Confusion. They didn't seem to know what they'd done. As if their minds were always arriving a split second too late to stop it. And that's what terrified everyone the most. Because if you can't choose not to strike, then there's no such thing as restraint. One species submitted an emergency proposal. Ban all human participation in interstellar combat simulations. Another took it further. Ban humans from any kinetic physical competitions, sports included. Too dangerous, they argued. Too unpredictable. Too fast. The humans didn't protest. In fact, they seemed a little embarrassed. They offered apologies, explanations, even medical data. Some of their representatives were just as shaken as the aliens. "We're not trying to hurt anyone," they said. "It's just how we're wired." But it didn't help, because wiring didn't care about intent. Reflex didn't wait for diplomacy, and the galaxy was starting to understand. There was no safe setting, even under observation, even in peace, even with rules. If a human felt threatened, if a shape moved wrong, if a shadow stretched too far, if a limb twitched just off-center, that was enough. Enough for the reflex to fire, for the body to take over, for the storm to arrive. And by the time anyone realized what was happening, it was already over. Memory of pain. They wanted answers. Real ones. Not theories. Not apologies. Not statistics. Just why. Why did humans move like this? Why did their bodies strike before their minds could even catch up? Why did they seem afraid when they were the ones everyone else feared? So the galaxy turned to evolution, to the long road that shaped Earth's children into what they are. What they found stilled entire chambers into silence. Because Earth is not just dangerous, it is merciless. A death world in every sense of the word. From the very beginning, humans were hunted. Massive apex predators, venomous insects, disease without cure, storms that uprooted forests, earthquakes, floods, wildfires. There was no peace, no safety, no gentle golden age of harmony, just pain. And the only ones who survived were the ones who moved fast enough. No warning, no second chances. The moment you heard the growl, felt the chill, saw the shadow, you were already dead, unless you moved first. So that's what humans became. Fast, sharp, twitchy, relentless. Their reflexes weren't a bonus. They were the bare minimum, the only shield they had against extinction. And it didn't stop with predators. Humans turned on each other. Tribes, territories, resources, ideologies. They fought for everything. Food, land, fire, water, belief. Stone became bronze. Bronze became steel. Steel became gunpowder. They didn't just learn how to kill. They learned how to do it quickly, how to anticipate, how to improvise, how to read motion, tension, patterns, and breath. A slight shift of the foot, a tightening of the jaw, a widening of the pupils. Humans noticed everything, because those little signs were often the difference between a beating heart and a bleeding body. And they remembered. They remembered it all. Generation after generation. Through story, through muscle, through blood. Reflex became ritual. Fear became focus. Survival became a culture. Even today, long after the world calmed, the memories remain. Genetic echoes, neurochemical scars, flash reactions passed down like heirlooms. That's why they flinch when something drops. Why they turn when someone stares. Why their hands ball into fists without them realizing. It's not aggression. It's memory. A memory older than civilization. Older than language. Pain remembers. And Earth taught its children very well. One galactic anthropologist wrote, "They do not live in fear, but fear lives in them. Coiled tight in their bones, waiting. Not because they are paranoid, but because for most of their existence, paranoia was the only reason they survived. Even their play reflects it. Sports that mimic combat. Games where reaction speed is everything. Children raised to dodge, tackle, strike, before they even understand the stakes. They call it fun. The rest of the galaxy calls it conditioning. But to them, it's natural. Just like breathing. Just like blinking. Because on Earth, if you wait, you die. And so they stopped waiting. They stopped hesitating. They taught their bodies to act first. And their minds learned to follow. One species, the Valari, known for their peaceful history, issued a public statement. "We now understand. Humans are not monsters. They are survivors. Their violence is not madness. It is memory. It is grief passed down through time. And that grief moves faster than light." After that, the fear didn't vanish. But it changed. It became respect. A quiet, unsettled awe. Because now the galaxy understood. Human reflexes are not just fast. They're not just sharp. They're not just dangerous. They are haunted. Every twitch, every flinch, every strike. is a whisper from 1,000 generations before, a message carved into the nervous system. Don't die today. And so they don't. They move. They strike. They survive. Because they can't afford not to. The Galactic Band. They didn't want to admit it. Not out loud. Not officially. But the decision was made all the same. A quiet vote. Behind closed doors. Unanimous. The humans were too dangerous. Too unpredictable. Too fast. Too instinctive. It wasn't about weapons. They could disarm those. It wasn't about strength. Other species were stronger. It was the reaction. That flash of movement. That blur of muscle and memory. The way a human could go from stillness to violence in less time than it took to scream. You couldn't negotiate with that. You couldn't prepare for it. You couldn't reason with a species whose bodies strike before their minds arrive. So the bands began. Quiet. Strategic. Layered under bureaucracy. No more human soldiers in mixed-unit peacekeeping missions. No humans in open combat simulations. No reflex-based competitions. No interspecies martial arts exchanges. And then came the subtle ones. Galactic embassies issued new diplomatic protocols. Humans must knock before entering a room. Humans must speak before approaching from behind. Humans must wear soft shoes so others could hear them coming. New signs were posted in embassies and council halls. Sudden movements may trigger reflexive response in Terran delegates. Proceed calmly. It sounded polite, clinical, reasonable, but everyone knew what it meant. If you spook a human, they might break you without meaning to. Still, not everyone agreed. Some species protested, called the bans discriminatory, argued that humanity was trying to adapt, and they were. Terran diplomats gave speeches, explained their biology, offered to wear sensory inhibitors to take behavioral courses. Many complied. They wanted peace. But biology is not bureaucracy, and Reflex doesn't care about policy. One incident was all it took to remind the galaxy why the bans were passed in the first place. A negotiation on the edge of disputed space. Routine. Peaceful. Until an aide reached for a datapad. Too fast. A human security guard moved without thought. Grabbed the arm. Pivoted. Dropped the aide to the floor with a thud. No harm done. No injury. Just instinct. The aide was unharmed. But the room? The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Because they hadn't seen an attack. They had seen a reaction. So fast. So fluid. So calm. The human didn't yell. Didn't apologize immediately. He just stood there, breathing, checking for more threats. His stance was still tense, coiled, watchful. His eyes scanning. Only when the moment passed did he blink, step back, and say, "Sorry, I thought he was reaching for a weapon." But no one in that room ever forgot. Not because of the violence, but because of the ease of it. The way the human's hands moved like they belonged to someone else. The way the action finished before the thought completed. The way his voice was so casual, so normal. One ambassador later said, he looked like he was adjusting his jacket, not like he had just dropped a grown being with one arm. After that, more bans followed. Some informal, some whispered. Certain races stopped inviting humans to strategic games. Others altered architecture. Doorways made wider, hallways made brighter, corners made softer. Entire sectors changed how they interacted. Training facilities stopped using surprise-based instruction in the presence of humans. Medical bots were reprogrammed to announce every single movement. Because surprise wasn't just rude anymore. It was dangerous. And yet, none of it was out of hate. No one blamed humanity directly. How could they? It wasn't a choice. It wasn't even a flaw. It was a biological truth. Humans weren't hostile. They were reactive. Too reactive for a galaxy that thrived on deliberation and delay. Too fast for a species that pauses before it speaks. Too sharp. Too alive. The bans didn't stop humans from traveling, or speaking, or exploring, but they became silent rules. Unspoken boundaries. Everyone knew what they were really saying. We are afraid of what happens if a human stops holding back. Because even in peace, even in friendship, even in trust, that spark still lived beneath the surface. That twitch, that pulse, that readiness. And no law could undo it. The trigger event. It wasn't a war. It wasn't an assassination. It wasn't even an attack. Just a meeting. A quiet room. A polished table. 7 delegates from 7 species. And 2 humans. One was an ambassador. Old. Calm. Smiled easily. The other was his security escort. Silent. Still. Watching. He hadn't moved all day. Not even when the arguments grew heated. Not when the Zentari slammed their fists. Not when the Dalvith raised their voices. He just sat there, hands folded, eyes steady, waiting, until the aide dropped a stylus. That's all it was. A small thing. A simple twitch. The aide, a junior staffer from the Sarathian Republic, had leaned over to grab his notes. The stylus slipped. He lunged to catch it, and the human moved. Fast. So fast that only the end result made sense. The aide was on the ground, face down, pinned by one arm, held there by a knee. No injuries, no blood, just stillness. The kind of stillness that feels like a hell breath, like a gun with the safety off. The human wasn't breathing hard, wasn't panicked. His face was blank, focused. Then he blinked, looked down, and realization hit. He stood up, helped the aide to his feet, apologized, calmly, gently. Sorry, I thought you were falling toward the ambassador. That's what he said, and no one dared ask what would have happened if he had been. Because in that moment, they all saw it. Not violence, not rage, not hostility, just readiness. The terrifying, effortless readiness. And the ease with which he crossed the room, closed the distance, and took control. All without thinking. It was like gravity, like instinct, like breathing. The ambassador, still seated, never flinched. He knew. He'd seen it before. When the room settled, when the silence finally broke, someone, no one remembers who, whispered. That wasn't even a reflex, was it? The ambassador looked up. It was just a practiced one. That was the final realization. The one no one wanted to face. Reflex wasn't just a natural reaction. Not for humans. It was trainable, sharpened, perfected. They didn't just act without thinking. They trained their bodies to make better choices than their minds ever could. And they got good at it, which meant that even their twitches were efficient. Even their flinches were tactical. Even their apologies came after perfection. The rest of the meeting passed in silence. No one raised their voice again. No one gestured quickly. And the Sarathian aide sat very, very still. Afterward, the footage circulated in quiet, encrypted channels. Viewed in slow motion, frame by frame, analyzed in stunned disbelief. The speed, the restraint, the control. He could have broken bones, could have done worse. But he didn't. He measured, reacted, stopped, all in under half a second. One tactical analyst submitted a single-line report. If this is them holding back, we don't want to see what happens when they stop. And that's the thought that haunted the galaxy. Because there was no aggression. No malice, no war cry, just a dropped pen, and a body reacting like it had seen death too many times to ignore it. They had spent years wondering why humans were like this. What was wrong with their reflexes? What caused this glitch in evolution? But now it was clear. There was nothing wrong, nothing broken, nothing malfunctioning. It was the rest of the galaxy that had grown soft, slow, comfortable, while Earth had stayed sharp, tense, wired for the storm. Because deep down, under the training, under the smiles, under the diplomacy, every human carried the same message. I will not die here today. And that message lived in their bones, in their twitching fingers, in their quiet stance, in their calm breath. Not out of anger, not out of hate, but because they remember. They remember what it costs to hesitate, to pause, to wait. So they don't. They move, even when they don't mean to, even when it's just a pen. Even when the room is quiet and the treaty is on the table, they move, and by the time you notice, it's already over. Final line, softly, chillingly. We asked what the hell was wrong with their combat reflexes. But now we know. Nothing's wrong. They're just human.